Hello, and welcome to The Right Stuff. I'm Veronique Mandel. I'm a complete wimp when it comes to horror. I was the kid who hid behind the couch when bad things happened in a movie. I had nightmares for 15 years after going to see The Shining. Well, you get the picture. But this week, I had to put all that behind me because I had to immerse myself in horror. My guests on the show are two local writers who love to write dark fiction and horror, and I've been looking forward to talking to them ever since I closed the covers on their books. Now, my first guest is Christian Laforet. Christian, welcome to The Right Stuff.
Thank you.
I'm really looking forward to talking about the stories in your book. But tell me about the title, first of all, The Space Between Houses.
Yeah, the space between houses is a concept I've had for a long time, since I was really little, actually. The neighborhood I lived in had, all the houses were very close together. And I was even as a little kid fascinated by this kind of no man's land between two homes. You know, the front of the houses are always nice and manicured. The backs are like the private area, but the middle is like, who owns this? What's here? It's like this dark passage between these two lives. And I was always fascinated with the things there. There's always discarded junk and forgotten bike parts. And it always frightened me as a child, like, what's there? What could be there? Anything could be there. And it stayed with me all my life.
I'll never look at the space between houses the same again, I can tell you. I'm going to have you talk about these stories.
Okay.
And you can see I flagged them because I didn't want to forget anything I'd read. This first one is called Trent and Son. I don't think I'll ever go off-roading again and not be scared to death. Tell us about it.
Trent and Son is... it's a story of a family that's, they're coming back from a day at the beach, and because of an accident on the highway, they end up taking an exit and they go on a back road. It's storming out, it's a nasty night, and they end up with a flat tire, and there's nowhere else to go, so they end up at a factory that is seemingly abandoned. It's been caught fire at some point, obviously. The parents go in, leaving the children in the car. When the parents don't come back, the little girl decides to go in and investigate. It's probably one of the darker stories in the book, and it's actually why I chose to open the book with that story.
Well, you chose well, because just when you think that, like, the horror could be done and there's going to be something, I should say a happy ending, but I'll let people read it. Yeah. Okay, let's take a look at Summer's Friend. Oh my God, when I got to the end of this, I nearly had a stroke.
Yeah, Summer's Friend is actually the consensus favorite for people. Everybody that comes up to me loves Summer's Friend. It's always their favorite, and it's the one that's gotten the most attention. And you know, anytime I've asked to do a reading, it's always, can you read Summer's Friend? So it was inspired by Lovecraft. Actually, I'm a big Lovecraft fan, and I just love this idea of ancient things lurking around our world that we don't necessarily see, but some people do. And
yeah.
So that's kind of where that came about.
Henry. Oh, I cried for Henry.
Henry, you know, I was, like all stories, and for me anyways, ideas, they just come to me out of the blue, and I think one day I just was thinking how awful it would be to be in a horror story, but if you were blind, like how much worse that would be to, you know, if you couldn't even see what was going on around you. And it just went from there for that one. It was pretty clear where I was going, in my head anyways, from the beginning.
Oh my, I hope I never go blind. A one-way road. Oh my goodness, I could smell her.
Yeah, well, this is kind of the opposite of Summer's Friend, though. A lot of people don't especially like One-Way Road, maybe because it's a lot different than the other stories. It's really not a horror story, but I mean, it is somewhat horrific, but in a lot of different ways. I just had for One Way Road, I had a vision of an old woman driving a souped-up car, really fast down a road, down the highway, for endlessly searching, and I just was fascinated with this concept and just started writing this story. It just came to me.
And she just drove and drove and drove and drove and
yes,
drove and
drove
drove
for a long time. Yes.
Yes, and never took a bath.
Yeah.
Just so you know.
Yeah, definitely not clean.
A fine tradition. Oh my goodness, you've got some brain.
Yeah, a fine tradition was, when I was putting the book together, I wanted to have 3 larger stories and then the rest to be smaller, 7 smaller stories. So I had Trent and Son to open, and a fine tradition, I think, is the largest story in the book. So it kind of was going to go right in the middle all along. I just, again, like everything else, it was just like an idea came to me of we see in these movies a lot of times and books, it seems like it's everyday folk that are having these awful things happen to them. And I thought it'd be interesting if it was somebody who was really rich and famous, was, in this situation, and how that would maybe change the way it unfolded if it was somebody like that.
Yeah, and I'm just going to use 2 words, yum yum. I won't dare explain. Old wounds. I'm just trying to see. Oh, yes. Oh, tell us.
Old Wounds, again, a little different than it's really not a straight horror story. It's it's about a guy who has captured a man he thinks is responsible for several killings some years prior in the city he lives in, including the death of his sister. But this old man is insistent that he is not connected to this at all, and that this is a big mistake.
And what a twist.
Yes, I think
we won't
so.
tell folks because you have to read it. Oh, and this one, Secrets and Ashes. I have lots of siblings.
Yeah, Secrets and Ashes is really the least horror story in the book, really. I have a brother, but I know 2 sisters that inspired this story, and I mean nothing like this happened to them, but I just was picturing them all along, and I felt that I just felt I could picture this story happening in my head, so it got written.
Again, you have great twists at the end of these stories, and I didn't expect that. 333. Talk about dialing a wrong number.
Yes, 333. That actually began life as a story for a writers group I was in. We had to just write a story, and I love, again, it's kind of a little bit of a Lovecraft thing, I guess, where this idea that something like it could be just evil, like even like a phone number could be an evil thing, and it seems ridiculous, but how frightening if it were real, And,
Trapped.
Yeah, Trapped is the...
I didn't see this coming either.
Yeah, the big finish for the book, Trapped, is probably nearest and dearest to me, because it's a rewrite of the very first story I ever wrote when I decided to start writing. I wrote basically it was Trapped, but it was awful. It was so terrible. At the time I thought it was brilliant, but it was awful. And then so when the time came to write this book, I knew I needed one more story, and I really liked the concept of Trapped, so I wanted to rewrite it. And I love playing with the idea that the story opens with he's trapped because his wife is pregnant, and he was hoping to divorce her, and now he feels trapped. And
because he was running around on her.
Right, and how by the end of the story he had no idea what trapped really meant, because and he finds out.
Found out.
Yes, he sure does.
They'd say he got his comeuppance.
Yeah, you got that right.
Do you look for unifying themes?
In this case, I didn't really. Space Between Houses kind of began as just a collection of. It was just any kind of subgenre of horror I wanted to write. I wrote, and then once I was putting the book together, though, I had a few other stories that got cut out because they did feel like they didn't really fit the tone of the book. And I was surprised to find that there was kind of some themes that ran through that were actually somewhat unintentional. It just is in the way I write. And I guess things that interest me.
Yeah, a bit of horror, a bit of gore.
Yeah, I was trying to get the whole spectrum of, horror stories in there.
Did you read horror, watch horror as a child?
Oh, yes. not so much read horror as a child, but watch. My brother's 5 years older than me. We just think my mom. We just lived with my mom, and so she was always working. My brother would babysit me. So when he was 12, I was 7, and he was really into horror movies. And
so you didn't have a prayer.
I didn't have a choice. I would watch them with them, and I really liked them. But they destroyed my dreams for a long time. I used to have awful nightmares, but I loved them, and it stuck with me all through my life.
Is it difficult to write horror, or is it easy for you?
I find it somewhat easy because I'm so interested in it. I love some of the, one of the things I love the most about writing horror is the psychology of horror. So, for instance, I like looking at what makes people afraid, and it doesn't have to be something obvious like a psycho with a hockey mask. Mm-hmm. It can be taking a familiar thing like an airport and making that airport empty. All of a sudden, it creates unease because we're not used to an empty airport, or it's a place that there's always life. It's always bustling. But and these kind of concepts I love to explore.
Did you come up with the idea for the book sort of as a whole bunch of stories, the way you've written it, or sort of did you have an idea for a book?
No, originally it was just a loose collection of stories. It actually started as a blog. I made a blog called The Space Between Houses, and it was every time I wrote a new horror story, I stuck it on this blog. And it wasn't until I started a new website called Adventure Worlds that I was writing a lot for that I knew I just didn't have time for the other blog, so I stopped that. I closed that blog, but I took the best stories, had them edited, wrote a few new ones, and then that's when the idea for the book started churning in my head.
Now you like scaring other people. Anything scare you?
I watch so much horror, I read so much horror. It's funny that the things I find scary are kind of like the everyday, to me, one time I came home and I was coming home and the door to my house was just open, just a little bit. And I knew I probably had not shut it when I left. I knew I probably hadn't shut it. But just the idea that somebody could be in there, not even intending to hurt me, but that somebody was maybe in my space was horrifying to me. It was terrifying, and that I find that kind of stuff is scary. But psychos and monsters and creatures, not so much anymore. No.
Do you have children?
I do. I have 2 little girls.
How old are they?
They're 4 and 2.
Oh, so a little bit young for horror?
Yeah, I mean, they should be, but sometimes they sometimes see some of the movies I watch. Not too much, but maybe a little more than they should.
So what else have you got on the go?
I have 2 projects going. One is a book coming out. It's already will be available by the time this airs, and it's called No Light Tomorrow. It's a collection of science fiction stories. It's got a co-author for that one. And the other thing I'm working on is a novel called The Infested.
Well, we'll look forward to it, but very briefly, tell us where people can find your books.
The books are available at various stores and online, but the best place to find the book would be to go to my website, christianlaforet.com.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Yeah, it's been great.
Christian Laforet's books, as he mentioned, can be found on his website, or, you can go to Amazon, all these sorts of places. We're going to take a short break, and when we come back, more horror with Mick Ridgewell. Oh, boy.